Hi, friends. Today's guest is someone I think many of you are going to resonate with. Courtney Devich is a speaker and the author of Mama's Got Anxiety, but It's Not Going to Steal Her Joy, a powerful and hope-filled message for moms navigating through anxiety and trying to find their happiness in all of it. Her writing has been featured in Her View from Home, the YouVersion Bible app, and Christian Parenting, where she shares encouragement rooted in faith in real life. Courtney describes herself as a Jesus' girl through and through, and that love for Christ shines through everything that she does. She's also refreshingly relatable, equally devoted to the Bible, a good book, iced coffee, and weekly, or let's be honest, bi-weekly Target runs. With humor and honesty, so much heart, Courtney speaks directly to women who are wrestling with their mental health, their faith, or both, reminding them that anxiety does not get the final word. She lives in Michigan with her husband and 3 kids, and today she's here to share her story, her wisdom, and her encouragement with all of us. So let's dive in. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Overshare with Rachael Elmore. I am Rachael. I hopefully will be your soon favorite therapist friend. All right, guys, I am so excited today to interview my dear friend, Courtney Devich. And I am just so stoked because she is an author and she is just a real amazing mom who talks and helps women with anxiety. Obviously, that's something that I talk about a lot. And, getting to meet Courtney early on in the author process, and so excited to just help you get a little bit of the wisdom that she's given the world. And yeah, we want to help you guys with anxiety today. So welcome, Courtney.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So I know this was a conversation, Courtney. I had so many thoughts and so many notes. I could go so many directions, but obviously I want my audience to know you, and I want them to know a little bit about what you're about. And so, yeah, that would be a great place to start, is just telling us about what brought you here and what brought you to write this amazing book.
All right. Well, it was never actually on my bucket list to write a book. I will start with that. I actually worked in human resources before I became a stay-at-home mom. And I became a stay-at-home mom during COVID because of my anxiety. So the pandemic really brought me to my knees in terms of my anxiety. I had 2 little ones at the time. I'm now since a mom of 3. And it is really just kind of one of those things that was birthed through the pandemic. It's not about the pandemic necessarily, but there are some stories about that in there. But it really is just about how my anxiety took my joy away from motherhood. I became a stay-at-home mom. I had these 2 little ones. I was not able to enjoy this season with my kiddos because I was just plagued with anxiety. It really it was a journey writing the book. Like I say in the book, that I was on the journey with the reader as I wrote it. It's now been out for 2 years, which is crazy to think about. Over 2 years now. So just the process and the journey that I've been on since the pandemic and since writing the book, God has just been so good, and just having me learn more things about myself, like how to, what are my triggers with anxiety, even really what's the root of it. I know that it started way before motherhood even, but motherhood definitely exacerbated it. So that's kind of the journey of the book. On the side, I'm still a stay-at-home mom. I really have no plans to return to work anytime soon. But like I said, I've got 3 kids now. I had a baby actually 4 months before the book came out, which I do not recommend, giving birth to a baby and then a book baby within months of each other.
That doesn't sound challenging at all.
It was a lot. And then, yes, I've added speaker to my list of things I never thought I would do before, speaking at different mom groups and women's conferences. So that's kind of in a nutshell what is about me. We live in Michigan. We now have sun right now, so that's great. And this has been 9 months of winter. It's been awful.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Michigan, the winter is no joke. Seasonal affective disorder is no joke, for sure.
Yes.
Yes, it's hard enough in the South. So I am so glad you're here. I commend you for being here and for being bold with your story and being bold with how deep of a struggle it was, and still from time to time is for you and for so many women. And so we've got this great framework of your story. And so I know, but I want my readers, my listeners to hear. Tell me about your journey with anxiety before you became a mom.
So I was formally diagnosed at 19, but looking back, I could see it very much just early childhood. I'm just always constantly worrying about things that a kid should not be worried about, obsessed about stuff. I'm always looking to the future, being filled with worry. Because then when I was 19, I was having a lot of chest pains at work. And so I went through like cardiologist tests and all the things. And they're like, there's nothing wrong with your heart. And they're like, it sounds like generalized anxiety disorder. Like, well, that makes a lot of sense. Why didn't anybody tell me this sooner? So I think like there's a lot of a biological component to it. I think there's some trauma from my childhood that also contributed to it being like early onset there in my younger years. And then, just the stress of life as I was like 19 and working to put myself through college just kind of like snowballed it all there at that age. But then when I became a mom, it really progressed. My oldest son was born prematurely, so that was a lot. And then the second child was a high risk because the first one was premature. So that was just that whole entire pregnancy was just filled with anxiety. And then you add a global pandemic and you've got like a little baby and not knowing like what's going on in the world. That just kind of all was a beautiful mixture of fear.
Yeah, that like perfect storm of just hard upon hard upon hard.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, obviously, a global pandemic was quite a challenge for many of us, but I know my friends that were pregnant and had newborns in 2020 it was a wild ride. And then even as friends trying to figure out how to support them, at that point, I was already writing my book as well. I think you and I were on the same timeline, which is kind of cool. Like our books came out
in
very
2023.
close. Yeah, which is
Yeah.
so cool. And so, wow, I just think as hard as it was when I had my first baby and just thinking about how the different constraints that you had and the different challenges that you had to go against, and then already having the propensity towards anxiety before becoming a mom, we just know that motherhood doesn't necessarily typically make that easier. Not that it's always going to be harder, but we know that it just adds a lot to the pot. Yeah, I like how you bring up that as a younger girl and a teenager, you realize that you worried about things that you shouldn't have been worrying about. And that just really stuck out to me. Can you tell me, would you be able to share a couple of what those worries looked like just so people can maybe relate?
Yeah, I was very obsessed with what I was going to do when I grew up. And I think a lot of kids like think about that, but I was 12 years old and I was doing a job shadow at a veterinary clinic and watching like then doing a surgery and everything. And that's where I'm like, okay, blood's not for me. But 12 years old, did I really need to figure out college and that path? No, not at 12. And just like almost like obsessive. I really was a big fan of Dr. Quinn Medicine Woman there for a little while too.
Amazing.
And like
I
would dress up and like play the whole character and like I was her, like it was just like this obsession type of thing. And really like the night before school, like I would never sleep the night before the first day of school, just be just up a whole night. I had a hard time falling asleep in my own bed. I slept in my sister's bedroom a lot. She's my younger sister. So growing up, like I was never able to do that. I had a lot of separation anxiety. I never could do sleepovers and leave my mom. And that also like trickled into like going to college. I didn't ever live in the dorms. I didn't do like a normal college experience because of the anxiety. So yeah, I think those are like the big things that stand out to me and in my childhood of just the consuming worries.
No, thank you. Because I think that, and I know those weren't intrusive thoughts, but like our obsessions and things that we fixate on with our anxiety, very rarely do people name them and actually say, hey, I was like obsessed with what I was going to do when I grew up and I was job shadowing at 12. I feel like it's so neat to actually paint a picture of saying, okay, this is not normal for a 12-year-old. And it's healthy. And I just thank you for being willing to give us examples, because I think it's like, oh, that's a great example of what that looks like to say, I shouldn't have been worrying about these things at 12 years old. I should have been acting more like a kid. And you are just full on, paying for the bills, adult mindset.
Yeah.
As a little girl. So
well,
thank
and
you
I
for
think
sharing
like
that.
a lot of times we think like, oh, that's just kind of normal for girls too. Like just in terms of planning out their future, like I'm going to get married at this age and my wedding is going to be these colors and, and then also just like the perfectionist tendencies that girls also tend to I noticed that a lot with just, I have 2 boys and a little girl, and my daughter is very much like, I've got to get this right and I got to do it perfectly. And so a lot of times I think that we just think, oh, that's just like normal girl behavior. But really at the root of it, what's the cause of it? It's a lot of times anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So in your journey, so you're 19 and you get diagnosed with GAD, or generalized anxiety
Mhm.
disorder. And look, there's lots of anxiety disorders under the umbrella of anxiety disorders. So just it basically to say, like, your experience can relate to anybody with anxiety. It doesn't
Yeah.
really matter the exact diagnosis.
Yeah.
We vary on how we treat different diagnoses. Just a little bit of therapy hack. So what happened from there for you?
I was on medication. And so kind of backing up, I had been on antidepressants since I was 13 or 14. I struggled with suicidal ideation at the age of 15 and self-harm 18, 19 there. So depression was already a part of my story, and a lot of times those two like to come together. Now, what comes first? I'm not entirely sure. Sometimes it is the anxiety, sometimes it's the depression. And I think I also have, since I wrote my book, learned that I have PMDD. So that's like another thing where I'm like, oh, so maybe I got my period when I was 13. Okay, so maybe that is why the depression is a part of my story. So yeah, I was on the antidepressants, but obviously they weren't helping enough with the anxiety at that time. Sometimes they can, just kind of depends on which one. So they added on an extra anti-anxiety medication on top of that, which was working and I was doing fine. But of course, that particular medication was not safe for me to take while I was pregnant, when I got pregnant with my first child at 26. So that's when I got off of it. And that's where, yeah, everything else kind of
Yeah.
snowballed from there. But in terms of just like my mental health after like 19, from 19 to 26, it was in a much better place. I eventually had weaned off of my antidepressants at that point, and then, of course, I've since gotten back on them. But that's just kind of the journey. There's
Mhm.
going to be seasons that are going to be harder, and that doesn't mean that I'm weak in any way or that I've somehow failed, which is something I struggled with for a really long time. Was like, okay, no, I was better. I was better. Why I don't need this again? But yes, sometimes it depends on what is going on in life. And then there's also other things that change too. Like my hormones have changed a lot with 3 children. And just our body, and I believe our brain structure changes a lot too with pregnancy and every pregnancy. And I'm not the same that I was when I was 25.
Mhm.
So yes, it is okay for that to fluctuate, and the seasons can sometimes change, and that is okay. That is not a sign of weakness or that you've somehow failed yourself in any way. If you have to say, I need help again, or I need to get back on medication.
Yeah, I mean, that's, my heart when it comes to that, and I was watching one of your Instagram reels about, like, hey, God has the ability to come in and just poof, make your mental illness go away. He does,
Hmm.
but that
Hmm.
wasn't your story, that it didn't happen just like that. And that was really powerful. And I know we may go down that a route later and talk a little bit more about that. But the fact that, I went on medication, and I've been on medication in different seasons of my life. And I'd never been on meds until after I had my babies. And I've been on meds, and then I have not been for different seasons. Our brain structures do absolutely change
Hmm.
while we're pregnant and after we give birth. We actually lose a lot of our gray matter in our brain. Don't worry, it comes
Hmm.
back. And there's a reason why we lose gray matter, by the way. I actually just got to speak at a conference on the neurobiology of the postpartum brain. And I was just trying to say there's a reason why we feel this way and why we might need that biological help. And what a blessing it is that God has given us things like science and medication and therapy and all of this stuff, all the things,
Hmm.
to be able to feel better and to not live in this prison, which is anxiety. So yeah, no, that is so neat. And yeah, there will be seasons where I will be on medication depending on just what's going on in my honestly personal life. And then there's years that I'm not. And so with that, I've just, I don't know, I think I've let it go with knowing, if it was all spiritual, then the medication wouldn't work. And
Hmm.
so with that, just really just love your story. And, also your faith is such a big part of who you are. And you're not discounting the power that God has, but that, prayer is wonderful, but we don't always just pray this away. Not that God doesn't have the power, but we sometimes he wants us to take these other steps in order to get better.
I mean, Paul says, he prayed 3 times for a thorn to be taken away from him. And don't know what the thorn was. It could have been his eyesight, like some say. It could have been anxiety. We don't know. But God didn't take it away from him. And if anything, it was because then God's power could be shown through his weakness. And so that's kind of the way I've viewed all these different mental illnesses that I've been blessed with. I'm going to say blessed because if anything, it has made me stronger in my faith, is pointing me continually back to him, because I have to rely on him when I am anxious. I have to turn to him for the light when I'm in the darkness of depression. And so when I am weak, he is strong. And that's just kind of a beautiful truth of it.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So the medication definitely worked. And, you go through this hard season and you become a mom.
Mhm.
And so you're tapping back into these resources to be able to get to feeling better. And I don't really know how to ask this question, but I'm going to ask it.
Just
Like,
to go ahead.
how long did you suffer in motherhood before you decided, like, hey, this is enough? It's time for me to do more than just take a shower or pray?
Well, I mean, I was in quarantine for over a year. But it was about, I think, 9 months into the pandemic that I decided that I'm going to get back on medication, because I had a panic attack. I was trying to get a pumpkin spice latte. I really wanted that pumpkin spice latte. So that was, yeah, September of 2020 is when I decided to make the call to my doctor and get back on medication. Of course, it took a while to find one that worked. The first one I think they tried me on made it worse, and I went into like a manic mode. But once we were able to find the right one, that helped. It was probably a few months after that that I started feeling like, okay, I think I can venture out of my house. I think I can go back into Target. But medication's not like, it helps, but anxiety is not 100% curable. Like, it helped, but it wasn't end all be all. Like, I still had to do the work. I still had to go. I went back to therapy. I had to take just very little baby steps here and there of just pushing myself. Like, okay, I'm going to try going out without a mask, or I'm going to try and, take my kids to the park, or I'm going to try and take them to the library. And I learned that the library is just full of germs, but, like, just continually pushing myself more to do these little things that I could, because I mean, my brain had been wired on that flight or flight response. It was kicked up to high. I was even experiencing tingling, like neuropathy type of pain. They couldn't explain it. They still don't know what. I was like, I think it's just my brain's been in like hyperdrive due to my anxiety. So it wasn't like it was just a complete fix with the medication. It did take a lot of work with anxiety, or with therapy, and continually just pushing myself just a little bit here and there every day. And then, continually just trying to tell myself, like, no, I'm not going to go back to that spot. I'm not going back into that fear. And reminding myself of what's true and what God has to say to me, and being in scripture and memorizing his word, and all the times he tells us do not fear. And that's just kind of really where I think you're able to truly rewire your thoughts in your brain. Doesn't necessarily mean that that like fight or flight response, that adrenaline is gonna like just totally turn off and be a normal baseline level all the time. But by being able to identify, like, nope, that's an anxious thought, that's an intrusive thought, that's not from God, and being able to reroute your brain and create a new neural pathway, a new direction, and a new thought pattern.
How cool is it that neuroplasticity is a thing, and that we are able, the long believed theory was that the brain didn't really change after adolescence, that it stayed the same. And it's really the last 10 years that we can see on scans, and we can see on MRIs, that the brain does change, and that we can change the relationship between neurons in therapy. And you don't have to actually be in front of a therapist, which is a good thing. You can learn some of these skills. And I mean, obviously, it does not replace therapy with a clinical professional. I do have to say that. But at the same time, how cool it is that God gave us the ability to rewire our brains. It just gives us so much hope to realize that we don't have to stay this way. We're not doomed. And while some level of anxiety, if you think about a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the worst anxiety ever and 0 being none, there's only 2 types of people that have never had anxiety. They are psychopaths and dead people. And, we joke. And every time I speak about anxiety at a conference, I'm like, hey, everyone has at least a little bit.
It's
You know that
healthy
Jesus,
to some degree. Well, you have to
Jesus
have
did.
a little bit. Yes, that's how we survive. Like it's good for in certain situations and to a certain level. And Paul had it right in Romans 12:12. Like, renew your mind. You can mold your mind to God's truth and not conform to the patterns of this world by the renewal of your mind. So neuroplasticity wasn't always the case. Paul had it right 2,000 some years ago.
That's so cool. That's such a good way to put it. And I've not thought about that verse that way, but gosh, thank you for sharing that, because you're exactly right. He was talking about it thousands of years ago.
Yep. Because other translations will actually say mold. So transform. The transform word in Greek is the word we get metamorphosis from. So to transform your mind. Your brains can change. They are.
Yeah. Just so much hope in that. We're not hardwired to be anxious. We're not. And I love your story of just saying, like, it got a lot better, but that it's still sometimes a struggle and that you still have to use all these tools. I mean, we can cure anxiety, but cure is never a 0. It's still at a 1. And so I love that you bring that up and that you do talk about that a lot in your book as well. And you paint such a great picture of what it's really supposed to look like when you're getting healthy from anxiety and what it's like, because I feel like your book, it just talks a lot about like finding what true joy is and not letting it steal your joy. Look, I know we talk a lot, you hear those terms, but your book actually like breaks it down. Like, here's some steps for how we actually fight this fight and we get well. And I was reading over it. I hadn't read it, I guess, in a few months, but I went back to it.
A few months? You've read it more recently than me.
I know, right? Like, but I was wanting to make sure that I was, brushed up on things, and I was reading a couple of the chapters. I didn't read the whole thing, but still, I wanted to brush back up on that. And I wanted to jump into something that I haven't been able to ask you yet, but talk to me a little bit about I must not be praying right.
Yeah. I think that's the chapter that got me the book deal.
Oh, really? I could see that.
That's chapter 4, right? Yeah. So it was really the fire for the book when I started speaking out about my anxiety, because I didn't even tell people about that. Like, I was working in this like HR corporate world type job, and I wasn't telling people like, oh, I get anxious before I have to go and terminate somebody or interview somebody, all of those things. So like, it was when I started speaking out, I started writing, and then finding like, oh, there's other women that struggle with this as well. And so I started writing about that more and speaking out about it, especially like just to encourage anybody during those pandemic months. And when I got told that I need to have a God-centered mindset, and that, your faith needs to be basically stronger, and you need to have the mind of God, and that anxiety won't be a thing for you, basically, that just really irked me, because I was like, okay, I'm told that I have this disorder, something that's like it's on my medical record. And that means that I'm not Christian enough. I'm second class Christian. I'm not praying right. I'm not, I don't have enough faith. Well, the Bible says a faith the size of a mustard seed will move a mountain. What constitutes the size of my faith? And just really wrestled with that. Like, how does this line up with what the Bible says? This idea that you can't struggle with anxiety and also be a Christian. And that's where I really started digging into, okay, what does God say about this? Yeah, he tells me, 365 sometimes, like, do not be afraid. But what does he say after every single time of those statements? Like, do not be afraid, because I'm with you, because I will withhold you with my righteous right hand. I do not fear because, the waves will, I don't remember the exact verse there in Isaiah, but basically like every single time he says that, he's saying, why? Like, why not to be afraid? Because I am with you, because I will withhold you, because I will help you, because I'm your refuge, I'm your strength. Like, he says it over and over again, and he tells us why. And it's not, I don't read those words, do not fear, as this condemning, like, I'm never to be anxious again. When I read them, I find comfort in it, because he's the God who's faithful to his promises. And so that was just kind of like really what set the fire in motion for the book was like, no, I can have something that's wrong with my physical body, my brain. My brain is broken just like if I were to have diabetes or cancer or any other sort of disease or any sort of other brokenness with my body. And that doesn't mean that I don't have faith. That just means that I'm in a broken body and I need Jesus. We all need Jesus. And healing is coming. It is coming. True peace is and the wholeness is in Christ. So yeah, that chapter really gets me fired up, as you can see. But yeah, that is a big message that I reiterate in other chapters of the book too, that taking medication doesn't mean that your faith is weak or that you're less of a Christian, and that God can use all these things for his good and our glory, or his glory and our good. And yeah.
I love that. I love that. What do you wish you could go back and tell yourself in 2020 before you started feeling better? What do you wish you could go back and tell yourself?
There would be a day where I would let my 2-year-old eat food off the floor and not be scared of germs.
I love that. Oh my gosh.
I've come a really long way. Even just to I don't check the burners anymore either. Like that was another thing I put in there regarding my obsessive thoughts. I don't check the burners at night before I go to bed. My husband is actually the one who's like, did we check to make sure that the doors are locked? I'm like, I don't know, you go do it. Just so yeah, just that it was going to get better, and that it was going to bring me closer to God, and that he was going to use it in the way that he has. All that fear and all that anxiety, he's used it all. So I think that's what I would tell my 2020 self.
I love that there's going to be a day that you're going to see your kid eat something off the floor and you're not going to panic.
He's getting his immune
because
system
of germs. Yeah, right.
Also,
that's
even my
huge.
husband was grossed out by it recently. I was like, well, it's either that or I have a toddler tantrum that I have to deal with because he dropped his cake pop on the floor. I would rather just deal with him being sick instead of a tantrum, to be honest.
I feel like every mom listening is nodding. Yes, what
you
a
pick
big,
your battles,
what a big step
okay?
that is. Yeah, you do. We wash hands and we take our vitamins, but we cannot control sickness. We cannot completely control it.
No.
Being sick is part of the human condition, which is that's usually one of my biggest triggers for anxiety is when my kids are sick, or when when I'm sick. I'm like, oh my gosh, because it's the worst feeling. As a mom, nobody really tells you and prepares you for, hey, when your kid gets sick and you're sick, you still have to figure it out.
Yeah.
And hope that, right? Yep. If you guys are all sick, yeah, that's a big trigger. And I feel like a lot of the women I work with still, the sickness is such a trigger. So that's such a good example of what you would want to say to yourself back then.
Well, and
you're going to get through it.
I'm not going to lie. It is still a struggle because my middle just started kindergarten this year. And my youngest is almost 3. So their immune systems are just non-existent right now. But it's we just had influenza A couple weeks ago. We've had hand, foot, and mouth. We've got croup, RSV twice, pneumonia, COVID, just all the things. And so it is got a mom's group that we meet a couple times a month or whatever. And I'm the last minute RSVPer because I can't commit to anything until the night before or even the day of, because I don't know if somebody's going to be sick, because that's just this time of the year, this is what we're dealing with from basically November until March. We will just be tentative to anything we're invited to.
I know. And I have a lot of friends and clients that, they've had to fight through just not going to a birthday party all winter or a dance recital because they're that afraid of sickness. And, we have to, I'm not going to go to somebody's house and have a play date when they have the flu, but we have to find a balance there. And with anxiety, it's crippling. It is absolutely crippling as a mom. I've not met many moms that don't have any sort of sickness, anxiety once we have children, especially the moms I've worked with that have had preemies. And I just feel like that adds another, it's another level. Of just the fear of having to deal with sickness. And then, is this going to set us back in the ER? Am I going to see my baby get poked by a needle? It's just, I don't want to be super triggering, but that is a very common part of this experience. So I can definitely appreciate that for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
And I love that that's what you would go back and tell yourself. I
Mhm.
love that. So I know medication helped you, and we know obviously like your faith is just paramount throughout your story, throughout your book. And I'd love to know what things really helped you from just the therapeutic side of things, because you went through and had a therapist or have a
Mhm.
therapist. And I'm a therapist, but I always want to know, I think too selfishly, because I want to know how to do my job better if I'm keeping it
Mhm.
real. But I also want to know, like, what has been said to you that really changed your perspective on getting well?
Like, and hard question to answer because there's just so many different elements that I'm like you wanting
I was
something
not
just
planning on
specific
asking
to
you that.
yeah, is this something just specific to like anxiety or just overall mental health and well-being?
Either way, girl. Either
Because
way.
I mean, I've been depression, postpartum depression, PMDD, like I got the whole mixture here. I think the one thing, like since we're talking about like motherhood specifically here, when I was postpartum with baby number 3, I had postpartum depression. And it was the worst postpartum depression I had had. I mean, I had some level of it with the other 2, but the third one really, I felt like did me in. And that was really hard because I was promoting a book on joy in motherhood, 4 months postpartum when the book came out. I dealt with a lot of that, like resentment towards my kids and my husband and the anger and the irritability and that like mom guilt. And I had one of my therapists say, like, just pick one thing today that you want to accomplish. And if that is all you get done, like that is enough. That really helped with like the mom guilt for sure. Like the more anxiety like type years, it was just choosing one little thing to do that's like outside of your comfort zone. Like I'm going to go into a store today without wearing a mask, or I'm going to not disinfect all of my groceries when I when I get them come in, or just picking, little thing, just like baby steps, and just do that one thing and make that the goal. And then once you accomplish that, then move on to the next one. And I think like the biggest thing, the tool that I've learned in therapy is just the self-awareness of it too. Like, where is this coming from? Is this like Courtney as a little girl that is like maybe felt this way or thought this thought at some point? Or, is this something else I'm being like fed to, like in terms of like a comparison trap with other moms and social media? Or like, where's the thought or that feeling coming from, and being able to just really learn more about myself in that respect, and being able to make the changes or do whatever it is I need to do to reframe the thought and to change it in that respect. So I mean, there's a lot of different things that therapy can do for you, just like unpacking the past, which is challenging and painful, and taking a look at just why you think the way you think type of thing, or like where does that come from, or so it's hard to pick. It'd be hard to pick.
Yeah. But I love your first instinct was like your therapist telling you, like, let's pick one battle today, or let's pick one.
Yeah.
You're like mom guilt,
Just
anxiety,
gonna
this,
just
that,
take
like,
a shower. Yeah. Whatever. Just
right,
one thing. Yeah.
right. Like she's like, do the next right thing. And
Mhm.
then if that's what you accomplished today, you can feel good in the fact of like you fed yourself, you fed your baby.
Yep.
And I love that. I feel like that's such good advice. So I love
Yeah.
that. And I love whenever I interview people, just being able to give a little free therapy tip so that,
Okay.
why not? I love
Well,
that.
yeah, let's
That's
do it.
fantastic. I know that for myself, I know I just had to kind of like one step at a time. So much of it is
Mhm.
that with anxiety is just doing the next right thing and just trying to like knowing that whatever the end of the day looks like with the, dirty clothes and the piles of dishes or all the things that didn't get done, that I was still doing the very best that I could. And that was okay. And if I was fighting against the anxiety, then I knew that that was getting me on the right path, because we know that the cure to anxiety is not avoiding, it's living. And so you do speak a lot to that in your book, which I really appreciate, is you pushing through and challenging yourself, just like you talked about, like, let's not, gosh, I remember disinfecting my groceries. I
Yeah.
remember
Yeah.
like this, like I had like a lab set up on my kitchen counter island in
Mhm.
2020 where I like wiped everything down. And then all I could think was, oh my gosh, did I touch my eyes at some point? Did I, I
Yeah.
remember that. So that's such a good example of just one thing to change the way that we do to challenge the anxiety and then to see what God is going to do. And look, I'm not saying, we wash our hands, we do the things that we can
Yeah.
within reason,
Mm.
but there gets to be a point of, being sick, being anxious to an extent is part of the human condition. And there's a healthy acceptance there of rewiring, not that we're afraid of the anxiety, but that there's a way of saying, let's just make sure that we make it a lot better. And here are the steps that we do to do that.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
just love that. I just love that. Okay.
What's the like biggest? I'm gonna turn the tables here. What's the like biggest thing that a
Yeah.
mom with anxiety like struggles with? Is it the need for control? Is it the avoidance? Is it obsessive thinking? Is it the like
Hmm.
restlessness, not being able to sleep? Just because my book covers a lot of the different feelings and symptoms, and I always have wondered, like, did I hit the nail on the head with all the things? You know?
Well, I think that would be impossible, to be fair. I think, with new moms, the obsessions, the intrusive thoughts, and then the anxiety that comes from it is such a common experience. And it's the number one reason that somebody calls me to schedule an appointment is they're anxious. And
Mhm.
so, I think I want to make sure I'm answering your question when it comes to like, I guess like what's the worst part? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Or the most common, like, what is the biggest thing they complain about when they come into therapy the first, like, session? Like, this is the thing I really wanna change most.
I would say it's like, I just can't stop thinking about this one thing. I
Yeah.
can't stop it. It's keeping me from sleeping. Sometimes, like, I had issues. I was scared to pick up my baby because of the intrusive thoughts I was having that made me anxious. And
Mhm.
so I just feel like it's like, I can't stop my brain from spinning and I want to stop it. And I feel awful and I can't sleep and I can't eat. Or if I do eat, my stomach is upset because that's a symptom of anxiety. And
Mhm.
it's getting in the way of connecting with your baby, of enjoying this life. And
Mhm.
that's so much of what your book does speak to. I think it would be impossible to speak to every aspect. And I mean, honestly, think you did a bang up job hitting so
Thanks.
many of the pain points with mothers. And so I just feel like this anxiety makes me miserable. And I can't stop it. Like I can't, and we can, but sometimes when we get spinning too hard, I always say like once we get to an 8 on a scale of 1 to 10, it's hard to de-escalate, especially without
Mhm.
meds. And
Mhm.
so we want to know ourselves so well to when we're at a 4 or a 5, like we put our foot on the floor and we kind of say, to your point with PMDD or with, whatever our hormones are doing in motherhood, being able to say, where am I at today? Am I at a 4? Am I at a 6? Because if we're already at a 6, we've got to do some things right then, right there that are going to
Mhm.
help de-escalate. We don't want you to get to an 8 or a 9. Not
Mhm.
that it's impossible, but that gets hard to de-escalate on your own if you're already spinning that far. So I would just say it's just the thoughts are just like the hamster wheel is what I
Mhm.
hear time and time again. And women will use the exact same words. Like they will use the same pain point words. And I've done it, I don't know, thousands of sessions at this point where it's like they'll say the same thing. And I can't, but I just want to hug them and be like, girl, it's going to get better. It will slow down. Let's do all of these things. But what we have to do is we have to interrupt that cycle of where it's cycling. And we have to
Mhm.
interrupt that hamster wheel so that because your brain, once it's anxious and it's in that loop, it wants to stay in that loop because of neuroplasticity. So
Mhm.
it's like trying to force your brain to stop and go and take a new road, which is more like a hike, because your brain doesn't want to
Yeah.
go that way when it's used to being anxious. And so much of what I see is that, and forcing yourself to choose a new thought that feels like you're lying to yourself to say, I will get through today. God is my portion. No, I'm not going to die today. If we get sick, we're not going to necessarily end up in the emergency room. It's not,
Mhm.
just because one of us is sick, it doesn't mean that we're going to be sick for the rest of the year. January,
Yeah.
we're not going to be sick all of the month of January just because we were last year.
Mm.
And really, I feel like when I see people really see women accept that and start to work on challenging those thoughts, we see the brain change, and it's the coolest part of my job. Like to see that
Mhm.
start to click is really cool. So yeah, yeah. So, and I mean, you could speak to that. Was that your experience of just like, you couldn't get it to slow down? You couldn't get it to
Yeah.
The obsessions. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I actually had an editor too with my book that had never known that intrusive thoughts came a lot of the times with anxiety. They'd always thought it was just a depression thing. So is that something I feel like I've
Wow.
read it in a book about the postpartum brain that intrusive thoughts are a lot more common in those like first postpartum
Very,
weeks after. Why
very.
is that?
Oh my
Is it the
goodness.
hormones?
Why is that? Yeah. I mean, it's not rational. It's chemical. It really is. And
Yeah.
I believe it's the spiritual warfare as well. Now, I
Yeah.
won't completely blame it on Satan. I don't blame everything on the devil, but I
Yeah.
think Satan gets a hold of new moms or moms with intrusive thoughts and just really is like, oh man, what a bad mom. You're such a
Because
bad
some of
mom.
those can be
He
really
just goes
dark.
to town.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
mine were really dark. And I don't actually typically name mine because I don't want to be triggering, but mine were really disturbing. And I always like to say the fact that an intrusive thought disturbs you means in itself you're not going to do it.
Yeah. That's good.
I mean, like I've never met someone that was like, "Oh my gosh, I keep having this intrusive thought. I don't want to be trigger warning
Yeah.
of dropping my baby accidentally." Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a very common one, very common one. And it's like, I keep thinking about it over and over again, and I keep thinking it's going to happen. Well, the fact that it upsets you to think about it means you're not going to do it. Like you're not going to on purpose harm your baby. It's fantastic. Like it's just not a thing. And again, we are talking about postpartum depression, anxiety. We're not talking about postpartum psychosis. Those are very different things. And so the fact that it disturbs a mom, a friend, a family member means that it's not going to happen. It's not going to come to fruition. It is very common postpartum. We argue that we really think all moms at some point do struggle with them. It's just they're so ashamed of them. And I love that we can name them and talk about them openly and say, I'm so glad that our thoughts, because we have like 26,000 thoughts a day. And the estimates are that we only choose 5% of them. And so I just love that fact. I love that fact, Courtney, so much of like, okay, and I know that we need to take every thought captive. I know that we do, but so many thoughts are just like something that walks by in front of us. We can't control every single thought that comes into our head, but we can control which ones like move in
What
and
we do
dwell
with
within
it.
us. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so was that kind of your experience with intrusive thoughts is similar to what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I actually just spoke at a conference last month on taking lies captive, or speaking on thoughts, but taking the lies too. And just, I've gotten into a habit of speaking it out loud, like saying like, no, I know this is not true. This is not of you, Lord. I take this thought captive and I make it obedient to you, because there is power when we speak it out loud, and that, retention and being able to wire more when we're able to speak it out loud. So, but yeah, I think with my first baby, like that was probably the thing that most like rocked me, was just like, and I'm not going to say any of these thoughts either, but they were dark and darker than the ones I mentioned in my book. And just thinking like, well, what is going on with me? Like, because I've had intrusive thoughts before, but it did seem like they particularly were very disturbing in those postpartum, like a couple months after having a baby.
Yeah. And they are. Most people in general have had an intrusive thought or two, because again, thoughts pop into your head.
Yeah. Can't control it.
And we can't control. I mean, and it's so cool to think that the thoughts we want to think, we're responsible for very few of them. And I love what you just said about speaking it out loud, because there is power in, even from a therapeutic standpoint, but obviously from a biblical standpoint, and being like, no, stop. That is not true. God does not say that I'm going to do that. And that's not in his nature. We are created in his image. So if we are created in his image, not that human beings aren't sinful, if we are created in his image, then that's not in his will for us to do those things, or for us to watch something that horrifying or think those thoughts. And I love what you just said about, you have these words that you say to speak over the intrusive thought, that you speak out loud. Oh my goodness. I love that so much. And I think, I mean, what a great calling that you have, that you speak to women on that exact issue. And you're doing such a great job normalizing it, because you've got 3 healthy, well-adjusted kids.
Somewhat well-adjusted. Yeah,
I know,
kidding.
but like, I mean, like you made it. Like you're proof that, even with intrusive thoughts, anxiety, and depression, that it didn't beat you.
No.
Like
If
God won.
anything, if anything, they're just going to grow up in a household where it is completely normal. It is not, and there are no mental health stigmas in this house. But yeah, breaking the cycle and breaking chains. That's what I'm doing over here.
Love that. Well, I know we're about out of time. Tell my listeners where they can find you.
Yeah, so I'm over on Instagram and Facebook at Courtney Devich Author. And you can also subscribe to my Substack. You can find that over on my website, CourtneyDevich.com. I've been trying to really move a lot of stuff over to Substack and getting off social media a little bit more. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And then my book is available wherever books are sold.
I love that so much. And again, her book is Mama's Got Anxiety, but it's not going to steal her joy. Highly recommend it. I've been able to recommend it to clients of mine. And, if I am recommending it in my therapy office, I do my podcast in my therapy office on this couch behind me, then that means you guys should check it out as well. It's available a lot of places where books are sold. So obviously Amazon's a great place to find it. And I will again link it in the show notes. Okay. So I promised that at the end of every podcast that I pray over everyone listening. So Courtney and I are sisters in Christ, and we are going to say a prayer over each of you. And I would love the honor to pray for every person listening today, and especially over the ladies and the moms listening that might be dealing with anxiety. So thank you again, Courtney, and let's pray.
Thank you.
God, thank you for this day that you've given us. I thank you so much for this time that Courtney and I have had to talk about anxiety and talk about you. Lord, I pray for every woman listening. Lord, I pray that this message will reach the ends of the earth, even if it's 5 women. I pray that they would not feel alone in their anxiety, in their obsessions, and in their intrusive thoughts. God, I pray that they would feel empowered to take every thought captive, and God, that they would turn to your word. And Lord, I love that your word does not pretend to be all-encompassing, and it doesn't claim to cure every disease, but that you are in your power are going to point us to every direction that we need in order to feel better. And God, we know that you call us to not be in fear, but God, we know that you're going to help us and give us wisdom in order to feel better. Lord, I just lift up each heart that's listening. I pray that they would leave here today encouraged, uplifted, as well as just knowing that there is hope and that there will be a day that they won't have to sanitize their groceries or do whatever it might be it's keeping them captive and it's keeping them in a prison. God, I pray for each listener to truly have the peace that surpasses all understanding, the peace that only comes from you. God, may the words that we have spoken bring you glory. We ask all of these things in the mighty name of your Son.